The Polyglot Gathering is brought to you by italki. Become fluent in any language.
Right, so, good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. Please excuse me if I'm a bit quiet. I'm an introvert. I'd much rather be sitting in the corner than standing here. There you go. So, do introverts make the best polyglots? I'll come back to that in a moment. See if this works. Oh, yes. So, I'm Julia Barnickle, and I'm now a filmmaker and photographer. I worked for 20 years nearly in IT, which is a very introverted kind of business to be in. I'm a polyglot. Sorry, I speak French, well, obviously English. I also speak French, German, Italian and Spanish, although I realised this morning that I haven't spoken German for 24 years. So it's rather a bad admission to make, but there you go. I also trained to teach English as a foreign language, so you know I kind of understand a bit about how people learn languages. And I'm what I call a sociable introvert, because I do like people. You know, I do like to be with people. It's just that afterwards I have to go and lie down. So, oh no, now it's stopped working. Isn't that marvellous? Okay, we might have to go back to the old-fashioned way of doing this, which is... No. Teamwork. I'm not going to use that though because it causes problems. Also, there's a hole here. If I suddenly disappear, it's because there's a hole here. Okay, so to get back on track, do introverts make the best polyglots? Yes, thank you. I have to say that the reason I came up with this title was not because I think introverts make the best polyglots necessarily, but it's a good title. From a marketing point of view, it causes controversy, so therefore more people will come. And here's the proof. In my view, there is no best, there is no better. You know, we're all learning, we're all trying our best to communicate. So anything I say is not intended to say that introverts are better or extroverts are better or whatever. We all have different strengths, we all have different ways of learning, we all have different ways of communicating. So it's important, I think, to remember that. Also, I thought, because I'm an introvert and a polyglot, I just thought that was a bit strange because, as I say, you know, I would rather be sitting in the corner than talking to people. Although this is less scary for me than having a conversation with you all individually, because I'm in my little zone here, so I can, you know, I feel protected. I don't feel like everyone's going to talk at me. And by the way, if you want to ask questions, you can, but I might run away. So, but perhaps if we leave questions till the end, because otherwise I'll forget what I'm going to say. So there you go. That's kind of some of the reasoning why I decided to call the talk, Do Introverts Make the Best Polyglots? Let's see if this works. Yes! First thing I wanted to say, actually, could we have a show of hands? I'll ask the extroverts first. So, who's an extrovert in the room? Okay. And who are the introverts? Yes! Good for you.
Are the extroverts in the wrong place?
Yeah, I think so, yes. But it's all right, we don't mind. We'll tolerate you. The first thing I wanted to say is that the biggest mistake people make when they talk about introverts is they think we're shy. And we can be. but then so can extroverts. So it's not really to do with introversion. Shyness is a fear of social interaction, okay? Whereas introversion is a preference for less social interaction, because basically it's tiring. And I'll come on to the reasons why in a second. Because neuroscientists have found there's actually different brain chemistry for introverts and extroverts. Basically, this is dopamine, which is a happy chemical in the brain, and introverts are very sensitive to dopamine, so we only need a little bit for us to feel very happy, and any more, and it's like, oh God, take me away. Whereas extroverts are less sensitive to dopamine, so extroverts need more dopamine to feel happy. And the way that they get dopamine is by being active. And I'll explain a little bit more in the next slide. I didn't draw the pictures, by the way, but I thought they were rather good. So when you look at the nervous system, I actually learned about this in a different context around health a few years ago. There are two sides, or two statuses, if you like, of the nervous system. One is the sympathetic system, which is also referred to as fight or flight. And what happens here is your pupils dilate, get bigger, your heart beats faster, your lungs increase and you take on more oxygen, and your stomach contracts. And the reason for all that is you're pumping adrenaline around your body with the aim of getting the hell out of there. So really, the bit about the stomach contracting is it's not a good state to be in if you want to digest food, which a lot of people do when you're rushing around, grabbing a sandwich or something at work, and it's very bad for you. And it's also bad for you if you're ill, if you're running on adrenaline. But adrenaline makes dopamine in the brain. The other side of the nervous system is the parasympathetic system, also known as rest and digest. And this uses a different drug, the name of which, or a different chemical rather, the name of which I've forgotten, but it's on the next slide. And then your pupils constrict, your heart beats slower, you breathe more deeply but gently, and it says your stomach contracts there, but actually I think your stomach must expand, because this is good for digestion, for healing, and all those kind of things. And it's gone very quiet in the room. You're probably thinking, why the hell is she telling us this? And this is the reason. Okay. So the fight or flight is adrenaline producing dopamine. Rest and digest is that one. I think it's acetylcholine, but and basically the sympathetic system, the fight or flight, is the natural state or the default state for extroverts, and the rest and digest parasympathetic system is the default state for introverts, which kind of explains why introverts are generally quite laid back and quiet and conserving energy, because that's the whole point of that system, that nervous system. Whereas extroverts are always looking for new things, new people to talk to. They're a lot more energetic. And it is because of this adrenaline pumping and producing more dopamine, because they're less sensitive to it. So there you go. There's a reason why we're so weird. Also, if you look at how an introvert or an extrovert process stimulus, for an extrovert, I'm going to move this chair forward a bit because I don't want to trip over it. So for an extrovert, you get the stimulus and then pretty much it goes straight through, it's processed very quickly by the brain, and then you get the outcome, whatever it is. Whereas for an introvert, you get the stimulus and then you have to think about it for a bit. It goes into long-term memory first. Have we had anything like this before? Maybe not, or maybe, oh, it's a bit like that one. And then it goes into planning, so how would that work going forward? And and then it comes out at the other end. And this explains why in team meetings, for example, the extroverts will always be very quick, or in brainstorming sessions even more. The extroverts are very quick to come up with ideas, whereas the introverts are sitting there thinking, well, that might work, but on the other hand, no, we tried that last week, didn't we? So how about we put a bit of that with that? So there's an awful lot of processing going on all the time. We're not very quick. Also, if you're somebody talking to an introvert, you might think they're just listening to you, or just paying attention to you, and we would love to do that. But really, we can't, because there are birds chirping, and there are leaves rustling in the trees, and there are ducks quacking, if we're lucky, and goodness knows what else is going on. And we can't filter out what you're saying from all of that. We just can't. So try as we might, we might look a bit kind of vague or vacant or stupid when you're talking to us, but we are trying to pay attention. It's tough being an introvert, isn't it? So, in a nutshell, introverts generally feel drained by social interaction. We prefer one-on-one conversations than being in groups. I've written overwhelm, that's the main reason, but there's another reason which I'll come back to in a moment. We prefer listening to speaking because it takes us a long time to work out what we want to say. I mean, I've been practicing this talk for a month, You wouldn't know it, would you? We prefer to think things through before we speak or make a decision, so we're risk averse as well. We don't make sort of snap decisions. And again, I should say these are all generalizations. There is nobody who is 100% introverted or 100% extroverted. So we all have little bits of both, and it just depends on how much of one or the other you are. How you'll behave. And also, two people with the same amount of introversion or extroversion won't have the same collection of oddities. We all have our own oddities. The final point about not being good at self-promotion, I actually run an online Introverts in Business group. So that's where I know that from. We don't kind of sing our own praises at all. We are rubbish at it. On the other hand, extroverts generally feel energized by social interaction. So, for example, if I'm with a group of people and I'm chatting, or even just with one person, I get very into it. I get very excited and chatty and you might think I was getting energized from it, but I'm not. I'm giving out energy all the time. Extroverts generally feel more comfortable than introverts with conversations in groups, and prefer speaking and communicating ideas to listening. And that kind of relates to the next point, which is about thinking out loud and making decisions quickly. So extroverts are greater risk takers. They don't seem to be as afraid as introverts of looking foolish, because that's one thing that introverts really hate. The idea of thinking out loud, I had a really good comment that an extrovert left on a website, and I thought it was so good that I wrote it down and I wanted to read it to you, and I'm trying to find it. And this is about thinking out loud, and I'm going to have to use the light to be able to read it. So this extrovert said, processing a thought is like trying to guess what's inside a bag. I have to take it out of the bag and see it before I know what it is. Talking about something is thinking about it. So that's totally different from how introverts work. Introverts, she actually said, introverts know what's in the bag just by feeling it, kind of thing, whereas an extrovert has to take the thing out. And in a way, I think that explains how we process it, whereas an extrovert might sort of say something before they've really formulated a complete opinion because that's how it works. You know, and introverts will sit there going, yeah. But I just think it's interesting to, again, to understand the different ways that we work so that we can work better together. And again, generally, extroverts are better than introverts at self-promotion. And again, this is from observation rather than just prejudice. Okay, so my experience of language learning. I'm just going to quickly go through how I learned French, German and Italian, because, as I say, what got me started thinking about this was how I learned languages, and then thinking, I did it in quite an introverted way, really, and how that would then go on to correlate with a survey that I did, which hopefully some of you completed. Otherwise it's going to be a total surprise to you. So, French. Yes, I did this one side at a time. So I started learning French in 1968. I was that big, like a babe in arms, age 11. So we didn't have the internet for like 20 years. Long time to wait. We didn't have satellite TV. We didn't have cheap flights or cheap phone calls even. So it was very difficult to practice the language with somebody who spoke the language. I mean, the teachers were rubbish, really. Their accent and their verbal ability compared with nowadays. So I wrote to a French pen friend. Yay! In fact, I had 8 pen friends. I had 2 French, 2 Spanish, 2 German. No, sorry, 2 French, 2 German, 1 Spanish, and then some others that I wrote to in English. And I thought everybody that was introverted would have pen friends, because it means that you can stay at home and you can explore the world. You know, because you find out about how somebody lives in another country. And I thought it was great. And I used to get presents as well, and that was even better. After a few years, I started sending audio recordings to my French pen friend to practice speaking and listening. Now, this took a lot of doing because I didn't have any way of recording stuff, so I used to go to my friend's house because her brother had a reel-to-reel tape machine. So for those of you who are too young to remember those, it's just go to a museum, you'll probably find one there. So that was quite good, being able to practice and hear her speak as well, because she used to send tapes back. But I actually studied for 10 years before I went to France, at school and then at university. And when I first arrived there, I'd actually spent 5 months in Germany before I arrived in France. And in the first week, I would start speaking in French, bonjour, je m'appelle Julia, and I'd finish the sentence in German, which people thought was rather strange. But it was like my brain was saying, okay, we're talking foreign now. And foreign equals German. And it took quite a while, or I don't know, a couple of weeks at least, to kind of separate the two languages. I still couldn't speak French, but at least I wasn't speaking German. And then I spent 7 months in Poitiers as a student, and that was how I became fluent. I joined a rock band, but that's another story. I know I don't look the type, do I? Oh, thank you. German, I started learning a couple of years later, in 1970. Still no internet. I wrote to a German pen friend, as I say, so that was similar. But also, I self-taught German for a year, because this was in my 3rd year at grammar school. So in my 1st year I learned French, in my 2nd year I started learning Latin. And in my 3rd year, one of the Latin teachers said, would anybody like to learn ancient Greek? Yes, please. Yeah. So I was doing those 3 at school. But I didn't think I would be able to learn German at school. I didn't think it was an option. So I thought, well, I better teach myself then, as introverts do. I mean, again, now I think it's a much more general thing. I think extroverts and introverts both teach ourselves these things. But the idea of sitting alone in your bedroom with a book as a teenager is a very kind of introvert thing, I think. And liking it. This was very different from my experience of learning French, because after my first year of learning it in school, so it was my second year, but it was actually a repeated year because I was learning from the same book. I spent a month in Germany with my German pen friend's family, and I was terrified because I didn't know how to speak German. I mean, I arrived at the airport, and I didn't even know how to say that I needed to use the loo. I mean, we just didn't learn any conversational language. You know, it was, oh yes, hands up if you speak German. Okay, so quite a few, so it's worth giving this a go. I was telling my German friend this morning that I met from the station, who told me that I hadn't spoken German for 24 years. One of the phrases that I will never forget from my German book, my first year, which I've never yet been able to use, is this. So eine Harpune habe ich auch. and for the non-German speakers, it's quite similar. I have a harpoon like that too. I'm still waiting for the opportunity, but I live in hope. So yes, we didn't really learn anything useful, but after a month in Germany, I was fairly fluent. Also, my pen friend's school had boys, which my school didn't. So there's a lot more interest in being able to speak. And I went back again at the age of 17, so that was at 15. You know, I'd never been abroad, never been on holiday with my family, never flown. You know, in fact, for the whole month, I only ate egg and chips because I was just so terrified. You know, there were so many things that I was outside of my comfort zone doing that food was not going to be one of them. A couple of years later, I spent 3 months in Stuttgart working in an office, and then a couple of years after that, I spent 5 months in Essen at the university. So 10 months in total, my German, but over several years as compared with the 7 months for my French. Italian, I started learning a lot later. I was 32 by then, and we had got the internet, I think. Well, just 1989, not really. But I think it had been invented, but we didn't have access to it. But I found out about adult education classes, and I don't know if it's the same in all countries, but in the UK, it's always native speakers who teach adult education classes, so you actually heard what the language sounded like for the first time ever. So that was good. 2 weeks in, my husband and I went to Italy for 2 weeks for a holiday, and there was a bar downstairs, which is always the best place to start talking. And it was quite quiet because it was the end of season. And I just practiced talking to the bar owner, but I only knew the present tense. And I also didn't know many words, so I used French words and put O on the end. But by the end of the 2 weeks, my husband said to me, ask him how they made that archway, you know, for the entrance to the bar. I'm thinking, oh God. And I discovered that it was made from reinforced concrete, which is also something I haven't been able to use since then, but there you go. But it's amazing how, with a little bit of knowledge, so for example, he said it had ferro in it, which I knew from French, is fer, is iron. And he also mentioned betone, which again is like le béton in French, which is concrete. And because my husband is in the building trade, I knew that concrete and iron makes reinforced concrete. So, you know, you take what you already know, and then you just kind of figure out a way to understand what people are saying. And then a couple of years later, I actually got a job where I used to go to Rome every couple of months or so, but only for a week or 2 weeks, implementing computer systems. So I learned a lot about computers in Italian, and a lot about vehicle hire, because that was the business, and a lot about accounting. So if you want to know what the Italian for an invoice is, I can tell you. So I don't know whether people's motivation for learning languages is the same, but mine is human connection. You know, I really want to have conversations with people, whether it's in writing or face-to-face talking, preferably not on the phone. I don't like the phone. We'll come to that in a moment. But I want to be able to ask questions, you know, find out about people, and also share stories. I prefer reading to listening, because I really don't hear terribly well, like, even in English. I mean, it's not that I have a hearing problem, it's just it kind of goes in and gets lost somehow. And I prefer writing to speaking, because again, I can do it on my own time. But I do learn a lot more if I'm face to face with someone. So it is worth it. So I'm fairly evenly balanced, because somebody pointed out that it's not just about being introverted or extroverted, it's about your learning styles as well. And I'm fairly evenly balanced between visual, auditory and kinesthetic. Is everyone familiar with those three? Okay, good. So I prefer to see words as well as hearing them. If I just hear a word, I'll forget it. Whereas if I can see it, or if somebody at least spells it out for me and I can picture it, then I don't forget. I mean, when I was learning Latin, I used to kind of memorize the shapes of the words on the page. So if the teacher said, okay, what's the Latin word for book? I'd think, oh, that was the third word down on the left-hand side. So the word next to it was that. And I also need to put what I've learned into practice so I don't forget, which again comes back to either writing or speaking. And the reason I'm going into this in this detail will become clear later, I hope. Yes, if I'm listening to someone speak, I need to see their lips moving. I really cannot handle the telephone. Language laboratories are awful. And audio recordings I'm not that keen on. I mean, give you an example of language laboratories. When I was studying French and German at university, I also learned Dutch as a related language to German. And we were doing things like Jan and Piet go to the station, or A Day in the Life of a Bottle by Hans Christian Andersen. And then when it came to the exam in the language lab, the topic was psychological warfare. And I didn't feel totally prepared for that, I have to say. I used to find it, especially in adult education classes, I found it difficult to compete with more extroverted members of the class. And this comes back to what I said before about extroverts have a tendency to kind of think while they're speaking rather than before. And it's just the way we are. But I found it frustrating because the teacher would ask a question, blah-de-blah-de-blah, and someone would go, there. And because they'd said something, the teacher would then say, that's not quite right. This is what it should be. So nobody else had an opportunity to put their point of view across. So I learned a technique. I started to prefix my answers with because by the time everybody had kind of in slow motion turned to me and said, she speaks, it gave me a little bit of time to think, roughly what I wanted to say. So I use that even today in group conversations or whatever. If I feel like I'm not going to be able to get a word in edgeways, then I will go, And I usually put my hand up as well, so it's not quite, please, can I speak? But it's, people can't ignore it, or at least they haven't yet. So, we come on to the survey. Just out of interest, did anybody here complete the survey online? Okay, so a few. Thank you very much. 200 people actually answered, which I thought was quite good, because it gives you a reasonable sample to make some judgments on, or to see trends and that sort of thing. So, without further ado, the first question was, are you an introvert, an extrovert, or an ambivert? Ambivert being kind of a mixture of the two. 53% said they were introverts, which shocked me. I thought it would be mostly extroverts because of what I'd said, that it doesn't seem like a thing for us to do. So only 14.5% said they were extroverts, and then the rest didn't really matter. For the purposes of this talk, I'm going to ignore the ambiverts, because the trouble is that because they're a bit of this and a bit of that, I sometimes test as an ambivert if I'm having a good day, but it doesn't really tell us anything to look at the people in the middle. It's always more interesting to look at the extremes. So, how many languages do you speak? Most people were honest. Most people said... Actually, this is where I made my first mistake, because I said, do you speak between 1 and 5 languages? But if you're a polyglot, you should really speak at least 2, shouldn't you? But there you go. So 76.5% said between 1 and 5, 21% between 6 and 10, and then 2.5% more than 10. So that equates to 2 introverts, 2 ambiverts, and 1 extrovert. Then I asked, how many of those languages are you fluent in? So most people just said 1 to 5. Again, I'm not so interested in the 6 to 10. This I thought was interesting, because 1 introvert and 1 extrovert said, yes, I'm fluent in all 10, or more than 10. Which I would like to applaud those people, to start off, to be fluent in that many languages, because I don't think I could do it. And also, I would particularly like to applaud the introvert, because, as I said earlier, we're not very good at self-promotion. So for that person to own that and say, yes, I can speak more than 10 languages fluently, I think that's, good on them. But as I say, congratulations to both of those people. Yes, asking, are your most fluent languages all in the same family or different families? Doesn't really tell us very much, but I was just interested because, as I say, I speak French, Italian and Spanish, which are in one family, and English, German and a bit of Dutch, which are in another family. So it was just out of interest, really. So 37% were in the same family, 38% were in different families, and 25% in both. So, it's all fairly balanced. So, when you're learning a new language, which do you find easier? Reading and writing, or listening and speaking? And some people said, well, actually, I prefer reading and listening. But that's not what I was asking, because, again, going back to my training to teach English as a foreign language, you have the written language, which is reading and writing, and you have the spoken language, which is listening and speaking. And they're quite different skills. So most people just sort of said, oh, well, I like reading and writing then. But interestingly, introverts were the highest for the reading and writing. Again, because whether it is just reading, whether they just sort of thought, well, reading then, or whether it's reading and writing, it's something you can do on your own. You don't have to interact with anybody to do reading or writing, or not directly anyway. So that kind of makes sense. Then I asked, which is your favourite way to learn a new language? Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes as well in case there's something specific that I wanted to say that I might have forgotten. But I don't think there is. So talk amongst yourselves for a moment. Okay, yes, and that's fine. So 40% said reading, 31% listening, 22% speaking, and 7% writing. Now I found that strange, that only 7% of people liked writing, because I would much rather write than do almost anything else. And then somebody said to me, well, maybe it's to do with the accuracy, that when you're learning a language in particular, which is what I was saying, it's much easier to kind of guess or say something that's roughly right when you're speaking, but it's a lot harder to do that when you're writing. You kind of need to be able to get the words in the right order, because you haven't got somebody sitting there going, no, that's not right. So I guess that's it, but I think it's a shame because, as I say, it does open up a completely new channel of opportunity. So looking at the figures, introverts preferred reading, 27%, extroverts preferred speaking, which again doesn't really surprise me because reading is something you do, and it's a solitary activity. Speaking, you need somebody else, so it's a more social activity. And neither introverts nor extroverts liked writing, so it's not to do with introversion or extroversion at all. Again, people didn't like this question. Somebody said, I forget what she called it now. She didn't say it was an oxymoron, but it was something, another big word like that. Do you like to have a good grounding in the grammar, or do you prefer to start with useful phrases? And the reason I asked it was because, well, think about my harpoon for a start off. That's a so-called useful phrase. But a few years ago, 3 years ago I think it was, when the conference was in Budapest and I wanted to go, didn't actually go in the end, but I started learning Hungarian. And each lesson was an online course, first time I'd ever done that. Each lesson just gave me kind of new phrases and little snippets. So one minute you're on the bus and the next one you're in a restaurant. And I thought, hang on a second, I haven't finished talking to the person on the bus yet. I want to know more about them. So I don't find that very useful, and I, as I said earlier, I want to be able to make my own sentences, and just learning phrases, I find, you can't do that because you don't understand the structure, and especially in a language like Hungarian. Does anybody speak Hungarian? Yeah, I mean, to me, it's weird because I had a Hungarian friend who I kept writing things to her, and she said, no, you don't say it like that. So I stopped writing. But it doesn't follow the same kind of norms that I'm used to with the other languages. So, anyway. So what did our panel say? So 34% of introverts preferred grammar, so that was their preference out of the two, whereas extroverts generally preferred useful phrases. And again, it doesn't surprise me, because if you do want to have a conversation with the person on the bus, albeit a short conversation because you're getting off at the next stop, then useful phrases might come in handy. Whereas, if you're sitting in your room reading a book, then knowing the grammar is perhaps more handy, or if you're going to write something. So, no surprises. So what are your preferred methods for learning a new language? 60% said spending time in the country. This was a multiple choice, by the way, so this doesn't have to add up to 100, just in case there are any mathematicians in the class. So yes, 60% spending time in the country, 61% books, because obviously books are cheaper than spending time in the country. And then face-to-face language classes was next, and then audio recordings, then online courses, and then at the bottom, conversations on Skype, which I hate personally. and so does everybody else. So yes, again, the preferred route for introverts was books, which again is not surprising, whereas the preferred introverts, so you can see I'm already starting to flag, this is what it's like every day. So the preferred method for extroverts is spending time in the country. Again, because you're in there, you're in the scrum, you're having a conversation with people. And the least preferred for introverts is conversations on Skype, which doesn't surprise me. And the least preferred for extroverts is online courses, which again doesn't really surprise me because there's no social interaction. You're just there with a computer. And having spent nearly 20 years working with computers, I quite agree. So how do you maintain your fluency in a language? And the options were reading, writing, emails, letters, whatever, listening to radio or audio recordings, listening by eavesdropping on other people's conversations, listening and watching, so TV, movies, that kind of thing, speaking, having a conversation with somebody, or speaking, which is talking to yourself. And I thought I was very brave to put that last one in, actually, because I thought they're all going to think I'm mad. But the most preferred way of maintaining your fluency was reading, which again, I guess, it's very easy to do, and then listening and watching, so TV or films. That was overall, and then broken down into introverts and extroverts. Introverts by far preferred reading, whereas extroverts preferred speaking. So again, no surprises. And nobody really liked eavesdropping. I was a bit disappointed about that. I do it all the time. But I suppose, in a way, there are 2 points with this. That one, it's a bit rude, really, isn't it? So listening into other people's conversations. But also, because you're hearing things out of context, it's very difficult to figure out what people are saying. You might hear something and think, oh, that sounds interesting, and then you find out they're really talking about, I don't know, their mother-in-law or something, and whatever it is, you don't know what the full story is, so it's not recommended for learning a language. I've also highlighted the listening and watching TV for some reason. I'm sure there was something really interesting that I was going to say, but I can't remember now. Oh well. Tempus fugit. Oh. Something changed, but I'm not sure what. Oh yes, that's right. So talking to yourself is all introverts, so I'm in good company after all. Yes. I mean, when you think about it though, it makes sense, because it's a way of practicing putting sentences together, but you don't actually have to have the tiring part of talking to somebody else and listening to them. So yes, keep it up, guys and gals. Oh yes, I asked if there were any other comments, so I'll quickly go through these. So language learning also needs to take into account a preference for auditory, visual or kinesthetic learning, which I mentioned before. Total immersion in a language is best by far, which I think we would all agree, but it's also the most expensive usually, unless you can get a job that sends you to other countries, which is possible. I've done it. Practicing a language one-to-one is easier regardless of whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. And 2 reasons. One is there's no competition, so you're just having a conversation with someone. And also, somebody said if they're travelling with somebody else, then they're less likely to try and speak the language because the other person might know something that they can say. So one-to-one is always best. Somebody else said some people are more willing to start a conversation because they want to build a relationship, while others are more reluctant to just chat. And that doesn't always relate to being an introvert or an extrovert. And again, I have to put my hand up that, I'm one of those people. Even though I am fairly introverted. I'm not as introverted as some of my friends, but I will talk to the little old lady at the bus stop, this kind of thing, just because it is about human connection to me. So there's no point in being able to even speak your own language unless you're going to use it with somebody. Brighten their day, that's what I think. And that might sound a bit daft, but it does. I live in London, and there are so many people that just don't talk to anybody from day to day. So I just think, well, even if they just have a daft conversation with me, then who knows? Oh yes, this was also interesting. People learn languages based on how they use their own language. So people who read more than speak in their own language probably prefer to learn another language in the same way. And also, not everyone learns grammar in their native language. I didn't learn English grammar. I got all my grammar understanding from Latin, German, ancient Greek. So yeah, in English I think we learned what a preposition was, and that's it, really. So that comes back to possibly why people are less comfortable writing, and prefer to just speak, because it's kind of easier. I thought I would give a few little tips about practicing languages as an introvert, since most people are introverts here, just from my own experience again. Because I know, hang on, let me just take that back. So I know, for example, I've noticed a few conversations online about the sort of introvert-extrovert divide, and the common thing that is said to introverts is, just stop being shy. And hopefully, with the slides that I had earlier, people will now understand a bit more about what it is being an introvert, and it isn't just about being shy. It is kind of, it takes a lot longer for us to think of things. So I'm not sort of saying, just get out there, will you? Just do it. I'm trying to be helpful. So one introvert said, I do all of these, the different list of things for practicing your language, that's it. But I prefer the more passive methods. However, I do get a real buzz out of speaking to someone, even if it's taken me a long while to convince myself I'm going to enjoy it. And I think that's the thing, I've started talking to people even more now. I think it helps being older somehow, people don't mind, they think you're just a bit batty, a bit funny in the head. But since I started filming, I film in London, and I started off just kind of, filming things, because I use my iPhone, just in case you're wondering what on earth that is. So I filmed surreptitiously, secretly. And I thought, this is ridiculous. These are people. I'm sure if they don't want me to film, they'll say no. So I started asking people, do you mind if I film you? And most people say yes, that's fine, go ahead. And I think, okay. And then I feel all shy, because it's like, ooh, I can film them now. But just making that contact, you'd be surprised. People are kind of waiting for it in a way. But, I didn't think I would enjoy it. But I do. And it wasn't me that made that comment, by the way. So I would say find people with common interests in your local area. Last year I got my iPhone for the first time, and I joined Instagram, and I found out about a brunch club that meets one Sunday every month in London. And it's been great because they like photography, so that's a common interest. And also, they're mostly Italians, French people, Germans, Russians, Poles. There's a couple of Americans and a couple of Australians as well. I think I'm the only English person that goes. Oh no, there's two of us actually. So, admittedly, in the beginning, I didn't start speaking other languages with them, but one of the Italians I now meet separately, and we started talking in Italian. So, you might not immediately find somebody who you can practice with. I'm not suggesting, for example, going necessarily to a language meetup, but just any kind of meetup that is about something you're interested in. But meetup.com is a great place to find what's happening. Let the group know you want to say something. I should really say, right, all together now. 1, 2, 3. But I won't. Talk to yourself as if you were having a conversation with someone. As I say, I do that all the time. It's the only way I get any sense out of anybody. You could also record yourself talking. Originally I said record a video of yourself talking. I thought, no, let's take it one step at a time. So, you can use, if you've got a smartphone, you can probably record yourself, or if you've got something else that you can use, perhaps a reel-to-reel machine, and you can record yourself talking. It's just useful to hear how you sound. You have to get used to the sound of your own voice, mind you, which can be a bit scary, but it's quite useful. Write to pen friends. I'll be your pen friend. So nowadays, of course, you can send emails. You don't have to send letters. But I think there's more people nowadays who are actually going back to sending letters and postcards. It's quite nice to get a letter through the post. Or you could write a blog if you're into that kind of thing. When I was learning Hungarian, I started a blog. I didn't keep it up because I didn't carry on learning Hungarian after about 5 weeks. It's just, right. I was going to say it was too much for my head. It was just, but I actually filmed myself speaking Hungarian, and I look back at it now and I think, oh my goodness, why did I put that on the blog? But there you go. I'm really an extrovert. My best bit of advice is fall in love. And it doesn't have to be with a person. Shall I reword that? But if you fall in love with photography, for example, or football, or what, it doesn't matter what it is. But if you're really passionate about something and you learn all the vocabulary around that, then it's a lot easier, again, to meet people who have a similar passion and to get into conversation. And because you all have this same passion, you kind of circumvent the need for small talk, which I forgot to mention. Introverts hate small talk. I remember when I was in my first year as a student, there was a kind of a party thing. I forget what they call it now. Freshers' ball, I think it was called. And everybody came up to you and said, "So, what's your name?" "I'm Julia, and what are you studying?" "I'm studying French and German." "Oh, that's nice. Where do you live?" And then you'd answer all those questions, and somebody else would come along. "Hello, what's your name?" I thought, I wish I'd brought a sheet of A4 with me that I could just hand out to people, so I didn't have to go through this. So, as I say, if you can find a common interest, then you just go straight to it, because we do like to just get straight to the heart of the matter. I have no idea what time it is now, by the way, whether
It's 55.
55, oh right, okay, so not too bad. So, any questions? The gentleman in the front who said he was an extrovert. Oh dear, what a shame, the other microphone doesn't work. Hey.
Actually, I just wanted to make one comment while you were talking about...
Oh, it's because you're by us.
Oh. Come and stand up.
While you were talking about eavesdropping.
Oh, yes.
And one thing I wanted to say about it, actually, is that I found out early on that it's much easier to understand a conversation when you're actually having it with somebody face to face, when you're trying to listen to two other people. And so I eavesdrop. Because that's kind of a gauge to see how far along I am. I'm not being nosy, but if I hear two people going by, I just do it.
Good for you. Yes.
And the last thing is meetup. If you ever do come to Bangkok, I have a meetup group for Polyglots. Third Thursday of every month.
Well
Look it
done.
up.
Yes. Thank you. That's great. Any more questions like that I don't have to answer?
It's not really a question. I think it's a comment because you said like you could put on like you could write out some like common interests, fall in love with something, so that you could find something to talk about instead of doing small talks. I want to add to that you could also talk about common hatred, because I think that really brings people together. It's like, I really hate that. Oh, I hate that too. I love it. That kind of thing. It's it really works.
Yes, I know. There are quite a few introvert groups on Facebook, for example, that I don't go into because all they're doing is complaining about extroverts. I agree, it does bring people together. However, you need to be very careful with that because you might find yourself, in some sort of weird community that wants to actually,
No, I don't mean that. I mean,
to destroy the world, or whatever.
You try to, figure out what you both dislike. Cause, I find it very difficult to like each other when I like something that you really don't like and you like something that I really don't like. So you just avoid those things. Common interests can always be fostered, right?
Yeah. No, it's a good point. So thank you for that. Yes.
Try to turn away from that thing. No.
Come and join me.
Okay. I'm an inveterate introvert, but I don't think I'm a slow person because the time I don't waste on conversations, I can think, which means that when people ask me about something, there are two situations, it doesn't interest me, and then I don't ask, and then I don't answer. If it interests me, they get half an hour of lecture before they have the chance to answer.
Yes. Yes. I think I got that. I think yes. You're basically saying what I said.
No.
Kind of. No, but it's not. Yeah, you're not.
You said people were slow because they thought. I said I have already thought before you ask a question, and if I know the answer, then you don't have a chance as an extrovert to come between the question.
I see. Well, can I shake your hand then? Yes. Well done. Well, I'm glad you explained it to us because I'm a bit slow. You see. Yes. No, that's a good point. I suppose my experience has always been the opposite, that I'm in situations where people are throwing ideas around, and for example, when I used to work in IT, at one point there was another woman who was doing a similar job to me, and when the IT director would come up with some weird scheme, she always used to say, "So how's that going to work then?" Whereas I was thinking, "So how are we going to make that work?" So that's why I'm always in that kind of thinking situation, I think. But yes, well done. Any more questions? Because I think we have to vacate.
That's the last one, but maybe... Sorry, it's me here.
Oh, right. I could hear you, but I couldn't see.
Yeah. But maybe you can say I don't want to... So, it's a question. So, even I don't strike as an introvert, I really hate small talk. Mm-hmm. But I live in London, so when I go to language exchange, it's actually I ended up with a small talk and I connect to the person, I just get bored. So, how do you... I don't know, I really hate these questions. Oh, so are you working? Are you studying? Why are you here in London? Which country? Oh, you're from Crimea, sorry. So how do you skip the small talk part and go more into the topics? Do you have a suggestion?
It's a good question.
Sorry, it's complicated.
No. I think, to be honest, I think probably I kind of switch off for the small talk, or I make myself absent. I go and do something else while. So, for example, I was at a brunch a couple of weeks ago, and there were 3 people on my table that I hadn't met before, and they kind of went round discussing where they came from and all this sort of thing. And then I sat down and I said, "So, where are you from? Where are you from?" "No, great, and the brunch was there then, so they didn't get a chance to ask me, or if. So that's one way of doing it. Or if you just kind of ignore the fact that they're asking you questions and just tell them what you want to say. So I mean, this is true for anybody. I think sometimes we just get a bit bored with the same old. So storytelling is definitely on the increase nowadays. So people are more interested in a story about you than, oh, so you live in Balham then, do you? Oh, that's nice. I went to Balham once, or whatever, So yes, make it more interesting so that they really can't come back at you like this guy was saying. They don't have a chance.
I think we're going to do one more question, then we have an announcement. And
Comment.
This is more of a comment, but I know someone who their solution to the small talk problem is basically to have a shirt that lists their name and some of their main interests. And I don't think this is so much a way of being of avoiding having small talk so much as just saying, sort of showing why someone should come and talk to them so that they'll get more conversations about things they're interested in. But it seems like something that, that's sort of what our name tags are trying to do here, but
yes.
It's hard to, but a little more custom.
Yes, that's a good idea. I think I would have it written on my back, though, rather than the front. Just so that I can be walking away. But yes, I think, we have to accept that there has to be some small talk, and I kind of feel like saying, get over it, because if you want to make connection with people, then you have to. And it is painful and it is boring, whatever, and you can do an A4 sheet if you want, and just say, well, here you go. But yeah, the thing is, it only lasts for a while. It's a bit like having a tooth pulled, I suppose. The pain lasts for a while, but it's worth it in the end. Maybe not like a tooth being pulled. I think that's the end of our thing. So thank you very much.